to Health Matters. I'm Justine Ginsberg and I'm your host for today. Today we're talking about suicide prevention and why it's so important for all of us in the community to know how to recognize the signs of someone in crisis. According to the American Federation of Suicide Prevention, in 2018, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death in the USA, with over 47,000 completing suicide and a staggering 1.4 million attempts in this country alone. White males account for over 69% of suicide deaths, and firearms accounted for 50.57% of all suicide-related deaths. While we all feel these statistics are horrifying, we still need people in our communities who are reluctant to discuss this subject to feel comfortable in doing so. Farmington Valley Health District and Resilience Grows Here have championed the community-wide training of QPR for just over 3 years and have trained over 3,000 people. To talk more about this incredibly important subject, please welcome our dear friend Tom Steen and Master Trainer of the QPR program. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, Justine. Thank you for having me today.
It's so good to have you, and it's so long overdue. We've been talking about doing this, and there is no time like the present.
Absolutely.
So, Tom, before we jump into this discussion, can you tell me what QPR stands for?
It stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer. The focus of the training is all about learning how to ask that question when your gut's saying to you that somebody might be in trouble, having the courage to say, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And if somebody does say that they are, how do you persuade them to get help? Yeah. And how do you refer them? That's the unique genius of QPR. And
you know, just when you were explaining what the acronym stands for, so many people in our community are so terrified to ask that question. Are you thinking of taking your own life? Are you thinking of killing yourself? The taboo still sits over the top of the mental health struggle of suicide. And, you know, like we say in the training, suicide's not the problem. Suicide's the permanent solution to a temporary problem.
That's correct.
And we need to get better at asking this question. So let's start by talking about the prevalence. Why is this such a problem in the United States?
Well, depending on who you talk to, suicide is a complex issue. Yeah. It's like no other death. Think about people who die by cancer or heart disease. There's no stigma connected to that. But when somebody dies by suicide, the stigma can be so tragic and so demoralizing for somebody who's a lost survivor to a tragedy such as that. So we need to talk about it. We need to be open about it. And we need to let people know that if they're, I call it the dark, deep place. I know you know what I mean by that. And when you're in that dark, deep place, family and friends and supporters can't be afraid to say, do you need some help? Yeah. Can I help you? And then you put QPR in practice, you can literally save a life.
You know, we often talk about, I often use the casserole analogy. You know, in this country, we are incredibly good at turning up to people's homes with casseroles. When someone gets diagnosed with a disease that has the potential of taking their life, the family's overwhelmed with casseroles. When somebody dies, we overwhelm people with casseroles. If somebody's struggling with a mental health challenge or a family is suffering the loss of a loved one from suicide, there are no casseroles.
No, they're not.
People are so frightened to talk about it because they don't understand. And part of what you and I spend so much of our lives doing is trying to break down that stigma, because just like someone with a diagnosis of cancer needs help and casseroles and a ride to the doctor, a family suffering a mental health struggle or a crisis needs that casserole just as much, if not more.
Yeah, this is so correct. You know, and Justine, you know this, and I'll share with your audience, I lost a son to suicide. It'll be 10 years, December 14th. And I remember those casserole times. And it's as important as they were, and the friends and the family members and all of the people in the community, it was great in that inertial. But you know what? It was the weeks and the months after that our family really, really needed the support. And and thank God for people like yourself and others who understand that and reach out and connect to people who have lost. It's just so important. You don't get over suicide loss. You learn to live with it.
You know, I think you and I often talk about, and thank you for sharing Tyler's story, because, you know, we often talk about the difference between sympathy and empathy. You know, sympathy is sending someone a card, which is heartfelt and comes from a space of true compassion, but empathy is turning up on their doorstep and saying, I don't have any words, but I'm going to sit here with you.
Yeah, amen.
You know, I'm going to bear witness and just be here. You know, I can't fix this, but by goodness, I can sit in the dark with you.
Yeah. And for me, those were some of the most powerful moments.
Totally.
And as time rolled on, and I found my way to the other side of the tragedy, I learned that you can't be afraid to talk about your loss, and you can't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. And us guys tend to be strong and so on. But you know what? It was counseling, it was support groups that truly helped me through that loss. So from a grief support perspective, very, very important.
And you know, Tom, I think the way you have used an unfathomable loss by championing the cause of suicide prevention, and by telling your story and by telling Tyler's story, you give people permission.
That's correct.
You grant people permission to be able to share their own story and their own grief and their own voyage to recovery, which is really what it is. It's a voyage with many waypoints along the way.
No, for sure.
And you know, the work you do with QPR is so incredibly important, which is one of the reasons I wanted you to be the spokesperson for QPR today. I was blessed to be trained by you, I think about 4 years ago. And since then, we've been the terrible twins out there creating problems.
It's like, oh, you need to call that guy, or you need to call that girl.
Hey, it's good to have a partner in crime.
Right, and that's certainly, you know, Justine, you and I, we'll go anywhere,
Absolutely, absolutely, at any time.
Yep.
Because you know what, it's having someone to reach out and be able to feel confident that they have the empathy and the understanding. So let's delve down into what QPR is. So we clarified it's about question, persuade, refer. How long is this course? Is this something you've got to commit months and months to doing it?
No, it's not. It's literally a 90-minute class that really the curriculum, the core curriculum is about learning how to ask the question, persuade somebody to get the help, and then to know where to go. How do you refer? But more importantly, we talk about suicide as a public health issue, and we talk a little bit about data, not a whole lot, but really very, very important that we make sure that people understand and are ready to talk about it, you know, to throw the stigma away, to say, no, we need to do something about it. And then have some tools in their toolbox, you know. And as you know, when we train school personnel, school faculty, they have the greatest gut when it comes to stuff like this. And so having some just basic skills to know, okay, that kid's in trouble, I'm seeing some stuff, let me ask the question, or let me find somebody who can, so that we can get this young person connected to help and be safe.
As we often say in the training, the absolute worst thing that can happen if you ask someone the question and you're wrong is you're going to have a really good conversation and they're going to feel seen. You know, no one can guarantee that you're 100% right when you ask that question, but if your gut says something's wrong, then something is wrong. The person might be suicidal, but by goodness, they might be struggling. So to think that you noticed something's not right and had the courage to say, Tom, I'm really concerned about you, and this is why, at least you can have a conversation that says, oh my God, Justine, I didn't know you even saw me.
You know, the research shows that most people who are having suicidal thought, or the professional term is suicidal ideation, is they're just hoping that somebody will reach out and say something. But we as in the society, we don't recognize them, because many times it comes in like coded messaging. And in QPR, we train people to be aware that maybe somebody that's struggling might be saying stuff to you, but I call it the back door or the side door.
Yeah.
They're not really coming straight out, But boy, your gut's telling you that, oh no, they're really at risk. I need to ask more questions. I need to persuade more so that we can get, and you're right. And better to take the safe way to this whole thing, and then come out and say, well, no, they're really not at risk, but boy, we had just a great conversation, and now that person knows that someone cares about them.
And that you're a safe person.
Right.
But if you're comfortable enough to ask that question, if
That's
that
true.
person does become so distressed that they do become suicidal or they do have suicidal ideations, they already know you're a resource. They already know that you're comfortable enough with this concept that you're not going to judge them, that you're going to help them.
Yeah, there's some really good research, recent research that came out about trusted adults. And not only for young people, for adults too.
Totally.
You have people in your life that are not afraid to hear what's going on in your life and know that they'll be there for you to help you. And so, especially with youth, there's some really good research with Connecticut high school kids where they're getting it now. The data shows that they've got trusted adults at school. And it might not necessarily be a parent. It could be a teacher. It could be a bus driver.
Totally. Never underestimate the bus driver and the janitor.
Yeah.
The two people who know absolutely everything that's going on.
And do we train them?
No. Well, we do. When you and I train, we do.
But so that's our cause. That's
Totally.
why today's show and educating your audience is we need to have that open conversation with our community leaders, that we need to have this conversation. And QPR is great. It's an hour-long training. You don't need any special education. You don't have to be a doctor or a nurse or a social worker. You can just be an everyday person who really is committed to making sure our community stays healthy. And mental health is just as important as physical health.
Totally.
And this is a tool in the toolbox to accomplish that.
And Tom, when we look at the prevalence, so we know that annually, and you and I say this a lot in the training, we know underreporting is a huge problem. If we don't ask, they don't tell. Mm-hmm. We know that annually in the United States, approximately 47,000 people complete suicide. But let's talk a little bit about the attempts. Yeah. And when you hear that number as an audience at home, it impresses upon you why every member of our community, be it the bus driver, the teacher, the pharmacy owner, mm-hmm. the gardener, the lady living on the corner needs to be trained. Just how many people do we believe, contemplate, or ideate or attempt to take their lives every year?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. It's a lot more than we all realize. I know that there's some national statistics that show that for every one suicide, there are 25 attempts. Yep. And I think that kind of plays right along to Connecticut's data as well. And we lose a person to suicide, reported suicide, every day in Connecticut.
Absolutely.
One every day. So think about those 25 who have attempted and what kind of services are they getting, what kind of support. But then we also know that for every suicide death, 116 people are greatly impacted.
Totally, that ripple effect.
Oh yeah, the ripple effect, as you know, Justine. So what are we doing to help protect them? And this is the story about postvention. My life and my goal in doing all this after losing my son Tyler to suicide is to prevent. Yeah, we have postvention and grief support, very, very important. But what are we doing to try to prevent it so that we don't get to that spot? The new term is lived experience. Mm-hmm. It's a little less intrusive and a little bit more palatable, if you will, especially those who have lived experience. And we learn so much from them. Those who come up and forward about their struggles and what they're doing helps us all to help recognize when somebody is in trouble, so we can put QPR in action and get people to a place where they can get better. Absolutely.
And we often, when we're doing the trainings, we talk about QPR in comparison to CPR. So CPR obviously is a skill set that many people in the United States have, and in fact in many jobs it's a requirement that you have CPR. And for those people who are trained, they will probably go their whole lives and never actually use it. As a registered nurse, in my role in intensive care, I used it on a daily basis in the hospital. I've only ever used it once in the public forum. QPR is something you will use many times in your life because it's about people.
Yeah.
It's about dealing with people and the struggles that humans experience. And let's face it, everyone experiences troubles.
Right. You know, I like to use the analogy QPR, CPR are almost identical, but in CPR, as a retired Y director, 30 years, and
you knew how to do CPR, and you still do.
I did CPR 3 times and once used an AED machine, and I in my trainings I tell people, you know, community trainings, I was like, if somebody had a heart attack in this room, I would know what to do because CPR has become my rote memory. That's what we're trying to do with QPR. We want this information in rote memory. So 6 months from now, 12 months from now, after being in a training with Justine or with Tom, you can remember. Yeah. And then you can employ it so that you can get somebody to a place of safety and a beginning of journey of health, wellness, which is so critical when folks are struggling.
Absolutely. And you know, when you think about mental health and well-being, and you think about the fact that every human being, just by virtue of the fact that we're alive and we have relationships, we all have mental health challenges. The thing about QPR and the way we help people to feel comfortable in asking that question is, rather than seeing somebody struggling and feeling like you need to withdraw and disappear into the background because you're scared and you don't want to make things worse, you feel comfortable enough to lean in. You feel comfortable enough to ask the question. You feel comfortable enough with, if you're asking the question and the answer is yes, I know what to do with that. You know, like you talked about with CPR, you've got that rote memory. When you know what to do if your worst fear comes true and someone says, yes, I am thinking of taking my own life. If you can hear yes and say, okay, thank you for trusting me and telling me that, now let's work together to find a solution and get you the help you need. If you can feel that comfortable, then you no longer see people in crisis as being something you want to run away from. You actually lean forward.
I like that. I like the lean forward.
Yeah, I mean, we really do. Well, you know, when you look at the analogy of mental health in this country, and on average, it takes somebody from the time of the onset of a mental health challenge in someone's life and it beginning to affect their everyday living and the time of them actually seeking treatment, it is a staggering 10 years before they seek treatment.
Yeah.
When we think of how you struggle for 10 years because of the stigma and the embarrassment and the feeling that nobody will understand, QPR offers you that key to be able to say, I do understand, I do get it, I do care, and I'm safe. So, if I wanted to take QPR, how do I go about it?
Well, there's a lot of ways. You could call Tom and you can call Justine and it'll happen.
And those numbers are going to be available at the end of the show.
True. But QPR is the statewide recognized evidence-based program. So it's being offered in many towns and many, many municipalities. You just need to reach out to your local health departments or your youth service bureaus. College campuses are offering QPR training and opening it up not only to their students, to their public. It's readily available if you just get out there and look for it. You know, put it in your browser. The other place that's really good for folks, there's a statewide suicide prevention website called PreventSuicideCT.org. Again, PreventSuicideCT.org. And you can sign up for their newsletter, and many of those programs, not only QPR, but a lot of the other type of training that's out there, are always posted there. So if there's something in your area and it's posted, you'll have the information right there. You can send the email, make a phone call, connect, and get registered.
Because, of course, suicide prevention is part of the governor's Healthy Connecticut 2020. That's one of the focuses for the governor of Connecticut, is ensuring that as many people have the skill set they need to help to prevent suicide and, to prevent that tragedy and that ripple effect.
Yep.
Believe it or not, we've got like about 4 minutes. So
wow, that was fast.
I know.
We could talk all day about this,
We could.
because we want to help people, and that's so key.
Absolutely. And look, before we finished up, I just wanted to touch on the prevalence of suicide with our active service, our military, and our National Guard. And there's been a staggering release recently from the DOD. So the DOD releases the statistics on suicide every quarter, and there was a horrendous number last quarter, particularly in our Air Force. So not just our Air National Guard, but our Air Force as well across the country. I think it was 76 at the last quarter.
Wow.
Why are they so at risk, Tom?
Well, again, suicide's complex, and I think though our military folks, and I must say I've been involved with the National Guard here in Connecticut, and leadership there, they're really trying to get their hands around it. But you think about a National Guardsman going on active duty, seeing all kinds of stuff, and then coming back and drop right back into the community. It's not a good thing, and that situation is now changing, and that's really, really positive. But in the training at QPR, when we talk about military, and we lose 22 veterans and active people a day in this country, and it's spiking in Connecticut as well.
Totally.
These folks come back, it's PTSD, it's depression, there could be a whole magnitude of things. The key thing is not only making sure that the support for the soldiers are there, but to have the same thing for the families.
Absolutely.
If we do that, we'll save lives.
Absolutely. So, Tom, we are actually going to run out of time, but before we go, I wanted to show the viewers at home the QPR booklet that you'll receive when you do become QPR trained. Obviously, the Resilience Grows Here project at the Farmington Valley Health District is very serious about suicide prevention, and as part of your training goodie bag, you also receive some wallet cards that give you specific emergency call numbers, signs and symptoms to look for, who to call, how to ask the question. So thank you for joining us, Tom. I so appreciate you being here, and maybe you could come back and we can talk a little more about it.
Sure, be glad to.
So today we've learned about the importance of receiving QPR suicide prevention training. Just like CPR, the training offers those who take it the opportunity to develop the skills needed to identify someone in crisis and develop the skills of being able to ask someone if they're suicidal, persuade them how to seek how to seek help, and most importantly, refer someone to the next most qualified professional to help. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please reach out for help. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline will be on your screen. It's 1-800-273-8255. I repeat, 1-800-273-8255. That's a 24-hour hotline that's available at any time with a phone call. If you'd like to be trained in QPR, please contact the Farmington Valley Health District either via our Facebook site or our website, www.fvhd.org. And until next time, your greatest wealth is your health.